This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
And a very good afternoon, everybody. Yes, indeed. This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily. Carol Massar, Tim Stenovec, live here at Bloomberg headquarters in New York City. We've got an interesting next 60 minutes for you. First of all, though, in terms of the markets, we did see gold topping $5,500 an ounce. We saw oil moving up $70 a barrel on the Iranian tensions. I mean, some of this is at play. We did see gold dip back a little bit lower. There's a lot going on, including earnings.
Yeah, and speaking of earnings, that's why we're seeing the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ Composite lower. The S&P is down by 0.7%. We're going to have more from Charlie Pellet in just a minute. But if you dig a little deeper into the index, information technology, Carol, that is the laggard, down 2.9%. Microsoft really dragging on the S&P and the NASDAQ.
I was going to say the AI story certainly being tested. If you're Meta, investors have been kind of happy. If you're Microsoft, not so much. So we're going to talk Meta, Microsoft. We're going to talk Tesla as well. And then two individuals that in politics, the nation definitely keeping an eye on. We're talking about California Governor Gavin Newsom, a Bloomberg newsmaker sit down with the editor of Bloomberg Businessweek, Brad Stone, coming your way in just a moment.
And in a couple hours, in the 5 p.m. hour, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani sitting down with Miles Miller at City Hall. That coming up during Balance of Power.
All right, to the markets we go. Let's get to Charlie Pellet. Charlie, take it away.
All right, we're looking at a lot of red, Carol and Tim, right now with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all moving lower. Lots of cross currents, lots of stories, earnings among them. S&P right now down 50, 69.28, where we stand, lower by 0.7%. The Dow now down by 168 points, down 0.3%, with the NASDAQ Composite Index down 337, down 1.4%. NASDAQ 100 Index down 1.2%. Broad-based selling today with the Russell 2000 Index down by about 0.6%. 10-year at 4.22%. Spot gold, what a story there. Trading above $5,500 the ounce before a pullback. Now down 1.7%, down $90 the ounce. Right now, spot gold, $53.23 the ounce. Silver, 113, moving lower by 2.4%. You guys talked about the move in crude. WTI, 65.17 a barrel, up 3.1%. Brent, the global benchmark, 70.55 barrel of Brent, up now by 3.1%. Bitcoin, the losses keep mounting today. Bitcoin down 6.6%. Right now, Bitcoin is at 83,385. Meta Platforms up 10.3%, hit top projections for holiday quarter revenue. Microsoft, though, heading the other way, down 12%, dropping the most since 2020 amid slowing cloud growth. Elon Musk says Tesla needs to build its own factory to make chips. Tesla shares down 2.5% after earnings. And IBM up 3.9%. It posted revenue that tops estimates on software gains. And the big story coming up after the close of trading, Apple shares up now by 0.4%. Recapping S&P down 0.6. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, perfect setup for where we want to go. Charlie breaking down Meta, Microsoft, and some of the other big tech names, including Tesla. Meta shares, they are definitely rallying, but we do have Microsoft shares. They are definitely tanking in today's session.
Yeah, I'm certainly interested in the Tesla story. The headline, Tesla plotting a $20 billion splurge to support Musk's AI future because of a $2 billion into Musk's money-losing AI startup XAI. Tesla shares down on that news.
Technology company, car company?
Not valued as a car company by investors, valued as a tech company by investors.
Right.
It depends on who you talk to.
Didn't we initially see Tesla to rally in the aftermarket?
Yeah.
And then we see it under pressure today.
Yeah, under pressure today. One of my decliners or deep T's.
That makes sense. Let's get into it. Let's talk really in a big way to Meta and Microsoft. Two big stories when it comes to the AI spend and build out. Angelo Zino is with us. He's Senior VP and Equity Analyst over at CFRA Research. He joins us in New York City. Angelo, good to have you here with Tim and myself. You've got a strong buy on Microsoft and a buy on Meta. And I'm curious if you want to flip those ratings based on the latest quarterly results.
Well, I wish they were flipped yesterday, right? But as far as the results are concerned, no. I mean, I actually think at this point in time, after these numbers, I would actually be I'd be more inclined to tell investors to buy Microsoft on this dip, on this 12% or so pullback. I mean, the stock is now trading about 2021 times our calendar 27 estimate, and actually is a slightly or a hair cheaper than our outlook for Meta. And when you kind of look at the two companies, I mean, you can make a case that Meta is growing much faster, and in some respects, it's actually attributed to the decline, I think, in Microsoft. When you guide to 30% growth, and on the same day, you've got to compete against that. I mean, you're just not going to look as good. But that being said, I mean, I think the valuation is very compelling here. I think the business model remains, just as strong as it's ever been. But you clearly have some concerns that have arisen, post results, primarily due to some of the concentration risk tied to OpenAI, and the other thing maybe a hair shy in terms of the Azure growth number.
Why isn't that concerning to you, Angelo?
To be honest with you, the Azure number I thought was pretty darn good. It actually beat our expectation, didn't beat the streets. But that being said, I mean, the Azure numbers continue to grow at a very good pace. And I think, if there was a slight miss to the expectation, it is due to the fact that they are partly supply constrained, just like others across the industry are. And I think, in the same respect, this is a company that also is looking to emphasize some of their, productivity tools out there. They're still, putting a lot of their CapEx spend on those type of, offerings, because in their belief, there's higher revenue per token tied to that. And that is probably a longer term story.
Okay.
And it is going to impact the fact that, hey, listen, they could have probably grown, north of 40% if they had moved, that GPU demand to that side of things, the Azure side.
So let's hit on the other thing that you mentioned, the concentration risk when it comes to OpenAI. This headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal late last night, and pretty much everyone on our team took a double take because they saw $60 billion as the headline number here. NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Amazon in discussions to invest as much as $60 billion in OpenAI as part of a new funding round. This according to The Information, who cited people familiar with the talks. If concentration risk is a concern, then why is Microsoft putting more money into OpenAI?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's just because those are some of the companies you mentioned are the ones that probably have most at stake in terms of OpenAI succeeding here long term, right? And if you look at OpenAI today, clearly they need the money. They're not going to be able to get to where they need to be without receiving that funding, and at the very least, they need to get this $100 billion funding, get themselves higher revenue, and then potentially look at an IPO in the future to get additional funds. But at this point in time, I think it's one of those situations where they are heavily committed to OpenAI, and they need OpenAI to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, going back to that number, the startup accounted, OpenAI that is, 45% of Microsoft's backlog, which stood at $625 billion at the end of December. So it is such an important part of AI for Microsoft.
It's extremely important. I'd also say this, though, the company does have north of $300 billion in bookings not tied to OpenAI. So you kind of look at the next 2 to 3 years, they do have that visibility in terms of being able to meet higher than that capacity additions that they plan to make here over the next couple of years. Not to mention, we do think that concentration risk does come down in the future as they continue to broaden their customer base as well. So yeah, I mean it's a concern. It is a risk to be mindful of, but nonetheless, I think if there's anyone that can continue to navigate and prosper in this environment, it's going to be Microsoft. Not to mention, this is nowhere near an Oracle type of situation at the same time, right? They've got the free cash flow potential to do what they need to do in any type of landscape.
And just to remind everybody, Oracle down 50% from those all-time highs just a few months ago. That happened today.
Right. That's a big move after that, quite a rally in that name. I know you don't cover Tesla, so don't get mad at me. But I do want to ask you that, more and more we have people come on and say, it's not a car company, it's a technology company. And among the headlines that were highlighted on their earnings update is the investment, Tesla's investment in Elon's XAI. Is this, though, a company that you are starting to think about, coming on your radar when it comes to tech and the AI spend and the build out and the AI impact?
Absolutely. I think it's, when you kind of look at the enterprise space, I mean, Musk is probably the biggest spender of AI in terms of GPU servers. So, he is an extremely, Tesla, the company, XAI, the company, that entire ecosystem that Musk owns, extremely important to the evolution of AI and what's going to transpire here over the next couple of years. I mean, you listen to Jensen Huang and you kind of look at where, that next massive inflection is going to come from in the physical AI world. And he continues to talk about, autonomous vehicles. And clearly, if there's anyone that's going to lead that path, it is going to be Elon Musk. So it's on our radar, and it's something that I think is really critical to this broader AI story.
Well, also on our radar is what happens at 4:30 p.m. Wall Street time today, and that's Apple coming out with its holiday results. It's expected to be a record-breaking quarter thanks to the iPhone 17, which apparently people just love and is selling pretty well. At the same time, there are concerns about China, and there are also concerns about the rising cost of memory. We've seen some of these companies in the way that they've done over the last, 14 months or so. What are you looking for, Angelo?
I think a lot of the stuff that you just mentioned. I mean, China is going to be a big story. It's been down year over year, 8 out of the last 9 quarters. We do expect a very strong China number here when they report in the December quarter. I think that's already priced into the stock. I think more importantly, what is the sustainability of that? Because we haven't necessarily seen sustainable growth out of China here for years now. So if Tim Cook can continue to demonstrate year-over-year growth here in the March quarter for China, I think that's going to be extremely important. That memory story, I mean, also I think I don't think it hurts the company here in the March quarter in terms of margins. But when you actually look at the iPhone 17 cycle, clearly they shifted towards 256 gigs as the entry-level memory across all 4 of their phones here. And this is probably going to be the most prolonged supply-constrained memory cycle we've ever seen. So it'll be interesting to see how Tim Cook, again, talks about it, because, again, it's not going to impact the March quarter margins there. But when you look at what has driven Apple here over the last 6-7 years, it has been services growth, and it has been that margin expansion story. So we want to make sure that remains intact. And then, of course, the services story, looking at low to mid teens growth year over year is also going to need to be sustained in order for the stock to continue to work.
All right. Good stuff, as always. Angelo Zino, Senior VP and Equity Analyst at CFRA Research, joining us in New York City. Totally appreciate that. Tech's going to stay on our radar with Apple reporting after the close, but I got to say, politics always front and center. A lot going on today. I feel like it kicked off this morning with that press conference with Tom Homan there. Of course, the borders are from Minneapolis. Let's see what's on the mind of our own David Gura. He's Bloomberg News correspondent, host of the Big Take podcast, joining us here in studio. We're getting ready for Gavin Newsom, of course, the California governor. We're thinking about the midterms. We're thinking about the current presidency. I'm just curious. And then we, of course, had Tom Homan. We were listening to you this morning. This presidency, what do you think is kind of top of mind right now on this given day when there's so many headlines again? He had a press conference, a cabinet meeting. It was short.
Like a press conference.
And no report. And there were no reporter. I think there were no reporter questions.
He ushered the press out. But you bring up Tom Homan's comments, and I think that story is what's weighing on Washington, the whole country. I suspect that the governor's going to talk about that a lot as well. But you have Tom Homan, the border czar, who, as he pointed out, has been in ICE for 40 years of his life, has all of that experience coming to Minnesota, and really reiterated that he wants this to be a targeted effort, a targeted enforcement effort. And I think that is such a sharp departure from what we've seen over these last few weeks, where we've seen under Greg Bovino of Border Patrol these wide sweeps of the city, and that's sown so much enmity among people in Minnesota. I think that is still weighing on. Of course, there's this fight over whether there'll be a shutdown in Washington. This is a crucial part of that as well, as Democrats and some Republicans now saying this is an opportunity to put some new restrictions on what ICE and Border Patrol are able to do.
David, you mentioned the cabinet meeting, and Joe Matthew on Balance of Power earlier was quick to point out that he didn't call on Kristi Noem to say anything. Are you looking at her as being sidelined in this, especially with Tom Homan going and taking over operations in Minnesota? A
very shrewd and right thing for Joe Matthew to note. Yes, he went around the table as he often does, and there were short speeches from all these cabinet members and not from her. Look, the president has said that he still has faith in her leadership and ability to run this agency, but there have been so many questions raised about her capacity to do that. And does the buck stop with her? I think that you see lawmakers now demanding that she come to Capitol Hill, answer some serious questions. I think that's likely to happen in the coming days.
You mentioned members of the president's team. Trump administration defending Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard's participation in that FBI raid of a Georgia County election office to investigate the 2020 election. It's 2026, and yet this is ongoing.
It's ongoing. There was that astonishing photograph, I think it was a Reuters photograph of Tulsi Gabbard in that ball cap in Georgia while all of this was unfolding. So raising a ton of questions about what's happening here. But to your broader point, you're right. Many years have now passed since the 2020 election. But as you listen to the president, he is fond of looking back, perhaps as often or not more so than he is at looking forward. And so, yes, he's looking back to 2020. He still talks about 2024. Legacy and history still so important, weighing so heavily on him.
You know, we're going to be listening to Gavin Newsom, California governor, in just a minute. Is he the leader of the Democratic Party de facto right now?
A great question. I don't have a good answer for it, but I think that he is trying to assume that role, take up that mantle right now. And we saw him in Davos last week. He
certainly gets headlines.
He gets headlines. He's out there. We've seen his social media savvy. We see the way that he's been able to insert himself into this conversation and frankly, get under the president's skin. So in that cabinet meeting, we heard the president with his slanderous moniker of Gavin Newsom a couple of times during the course of the president's remarks. So I think that he relishes that. Gavin Newsom relishes that. Is he the head of the party? I can't say, but I think he's certainly the person who's vying to have that role in this moment.
Is there a leader of the Democratic Party right now?
The questions only get more and more difficult. No, I don't think there is an easily identifiable one. I think it's a very good point. And so you have, obviously, congressional leadership, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries. You have former presidents who have weighed in on what's been happening in Minnesota. But no, there isn't somebody who is really easily identifiable as that person right now.
But it does seem like this moment is an opportunity for Democrats ahead of the midterms. I mean, you have polling that shows from various outlets that Americans are not in favor of the way that the federal government has carried out deportations in Minneapolis. And it seems like this is an opportunity for Democrats ahead of the midterms to say, this is what you're getting with President Trump. If you want something different, now's your chance.
And frankly, a lot of what we're seeing here was something that Democrats warned about during the campaign. So you're right. They have now in stark relief what this actually looks like as it's happening. I think that'll be something that Democrats will really embrace and talk about more and more. I think affordability is another thing. We see the president vacillating. Does he talk about it? Does he not talk about it? But speaking of sentiment data, polling data, we had that New York Times Siena College poll. The number of people in this country now, as surveyed by those two institutions, who feel as though becoming middle class is unattainable, just startling. And I think is something that both parties need to recognize and kind of figure out what to do with as we head to the midterm elections.
Does it feel like, David, there is a shift? Like you look at some of the polling, but I also think about the CEO community finally, certainly with what is going on in Minneapolis, coming out and taking a stand and not comfortable about this. And we've seen the business community so quiet. Instead, we've seen them often in the Oval Office or at White House gatherings.
I think that they have been struggling to navigate this environment. We had a moment back in 2020 after the killing of George Floyd when companies did feel kind of empowered to speak out as individuals. You look at this latest statement from the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, there's kind of a strength in numbers part of that. It was a fairly bland statement. It was something. I think we have to acknowledge that. For me, what I pay attention to is what's happening at the level beneath that in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, where you have a lot of smaller businesses who are taking a stand, closing their doors and speaking out. So I think there is that vacuum. Big executives not speaking out, afraid of doing so, but you see other business leaders kind of establishing themselves as taking a moral ground here, and I think that's something that maybe these other executives will look at and try to model.
Well, speaking of executives, the executives of other states that are not Minnesota, when they think about ICE in their own states, I'm wondering if what they're seeing happen in Minnesota gives them an idea of a blueprint on how to deal with federal agents.
It has to be incredibly sobering, and there has to be a lot of worry among those governors' mansions and offices across the country. Look, I think that the White House would like to see what happened in Minneapolis as an outlier incident here. I think that if this is replicated in other places, governors have reason to be worried, because what's at play here is this stark divide between states, cities that really don't want the federal government to be playing this role, and a federal government that says it's our role to play and we're going to do it. Look, again, going back to what Tom Homan said this morning, he says he's not there for photo ops, he's there to figure this out. He stressed how much he wants to have dialogue with those leaders, both at the state and
yet
local
those
level.
local leaders were not there, were they?
They were not there on stage with him. And, it was interesting in his comments. He noted where they agreed. He noted where they disagreed. There's still a lot of that there. Clear to me, as I think I said this morning after his remarks, no indication here that ICE, the administration, is anywhere close to retreating from Minneapolis. And so I think to your question, Tim, a lot of governors are looking at sort of how attenuated this has been, how long it's gone on, and are probably wondering, if this is replicated, how damaging that could be to a city and a community.
As we mentioned, we're waiting to hear from Governor Gavin Newsom, one of those governors who's definitely watching everything happening in Minneapolis very closely. He's going to be speaking to Brad Stone of Bloomberg Businessweek. He's the editor of the magazine in just a few minutes, live in San Francisco at our bureau there. We're going to bring that conversation to you as it does begin.
Yeah, we're talking, of course, though, with our own David Gura. David, I was thinking about, too, just changing political winds or people jockeying. Senator Amy Klobuchar coming out and announcing her plans to run for Minnesota governor.
Yes, and this was widely rumored to be happening. She announced that today. She sees this as a moment for new leadership there. Obviously, Tim Walz stepping aside, saying he's not going to run once again. I think we're likely to see this kind of transition play out in a few other states in the months ahead as well. Kind of looking at that executive role in the state as an opportunity, having been in Washington, maybe born out of frustration, maybe born out of feeling like they can make a difference back home. But I think all eyes are on Minnesota and how they find their way out of this. And I think that it is a moment for her to kind of, if elected, figure out a way to do that.
Well, we're going to be speaking to Josh Green a little later in the next hour, and he has a column out yesterday that talks about the Minnesota governor's race shifting just in recent days as a result. We're going to be speaking to him about that in just a few minutes. David Gura, thanks so much for joining us here on Bloomberg Businessweek Daily.